That is important. Okay. Recording. And the next line over. This structure can also be used with materials like leather for a cover. So if you find some kind of thicker leather, that can be used as a cover that is sewn into. Might have seen these books at different places. It's kind of a common hand-bound book structure. Okay, so we have our series of parallel lines scored into the paper. That's visible. And our next step is to determine where we want our sewing stations to be. And similar to the French web, we also want stations at the head and tail and then in pairs. So the pairs can be spaced out definitely more than 1/4 inch. They can be really however long that you want, but to create those long stitches, we definitely need to work in pairs again. So I'll do a little more than 1/2 inch from the head and tail, maybe 5/8 or so. And then, let's see, maybe at 1.5 inches away, and then 2 at the head, and 2 inches away from the bottom, followed by another 1/2 inch. So 2 pairs here. And I just made some prick marks there to see where they're at. Now we're going to line up. You can use a grid if you have a grid, or if you don't, that's okay. But we're going to score perpendicular lines compared to the ones running up and down all the way across. So I just scored here all the way across there. And at each point, okay, so we have all along here, both perpendicular and now horizontal lines as well. And if we refer back to the diagram, we need to make prick marks at certain places, and they'll be different, the head and tail single lines versus the pairs in between. So at the head and tail, we'll prick a mark at 1 millimeter, the very edge. At 1 and 1. And then according to the diagram, and pull up here. We'll do another one at between 3 and 5. So we skip a line and make one right in between the 3 and 5 mark. And do that as well on the other side. And then one more at the mark between, right in the middle, basically. So find the very middle of the template and make a punch mark there. Then repeat that for the other side. Add 1 and 1 between 3 and 5. Between 3 and 5, and then the very middle. So those are the head and tail, and then in between is a little bit different. So the first mark is between 1 and 3 millimeters. 1 and 3 millimeters. And then skip a section and then add another one. And same for the other side. So that's what those pair marks should look like. And you can carry that same pattern down with all the pairs that you have. Maybe not best to prick those measurements with probably a pencil and distinguish the two. Okay, so this template is now ready to transfer. So once you have your case constructed like this, you can place this template directly onto the spine and center it head and tail. Important. And then transfer the holes that you just marked off directly into the case. And then they're a little bit hard to see, so you can go back and sort of open them up with your awl. I'm not going to go through the whole way, but just open them up a little bit so they're more visible. So, up again. So you'll have, maybe you could see from the side a little better. You'll have a line of holes going down. I'll have to go back and really open them up to see them a little bit better. But that is the process of measuring them out and punching them into the spine. Any questions on that process?
Could you just do the beginning part again, since you weren't recording that?
Yeah. Of the, let's see.
The space, like the first initial spacings.
The initial spacing, yeah. Is measured by, I can actually drag over the handout, which has a diagram on it.
All right.
And it's also on my courses, but just so you can open it up. So the parallel lines are numbered based on the number of sections that we have. We'll always have our first and last measurement at 1 millimeter because that accounts for one section. But then based on the sewing, in between are 2 millimeters. So 1, 3, 5, 7, then 1, 3, 5, 7 millimeters, all scored up and down. And we make marks at the head and the tail in order to connect them precisely. Is that helpful? Okay. Cool. Cool. And I guess to get fully ready to sew the sections into the case, we would transfer the perpendicular points and make them punching stations, either using this little template directly into a section, or if it's a little bit too small, you could transfer these marks onto a larger card and then punch all of the stations for your sections.
Now, just as like a topic of working at home versus in studio, so I've been using like pins to make holes instead of an awl, but they're kind of flimsy. Is there anything you'd suggest that like has a little more strength that doesn't require purchasing something from Amazon? Because I'm not 100% behind that right now.
Totally. Oh yeah. I respect that. Yeah. Yeah, so if you have some scrap wood or dowel or cork works really well.
Okay.
You can put a little hole using maybe a small nail and hammering it into the end of whatever material you're using, and then put the pin or a needle or anything that could make holes into that hole with some, I use wood glue. And then that gives you a lot more like stability with a handle.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you. I've been like poking my fingers into extinction.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've been there and it's not great. Yeah, great question for sure. Let me think. The case construction, I have not recorded that video, but I could do one like right now for those who are new and those who aren't new. Let me think. I'm trying to think of, because I know Raven, Nikki, and Nathaniel were here last time, and maybe we could talk about any questions that have come up for you.
I mean, I personally didn't have any questions. I just came to listen.
Yeah.
So that's really why I'm here. So I'm just kind of chilling right now.
Yeah. Awesome. How about you all, Nikki or Nathaniel?
I'm kind of in the same boat. I think I'm gonna do the drum.
Drum leaf.
The drum leaf manner of how to make a book together. Just because again, like resources are rather limited. So I'm just here to like see the techniques because it's still pretty neat.
Yeah, awesome. That handout is up on my courses from last class.
Yes.
Just so you can see it all laid out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nathaniel, how about you? Any questions come up?
I'm kind of just in the same boat as Raven. Here just to listen.
Yeah. Y'all are like kind of ahead of schedule, which is great. And if we were to, I was thinking if we finish early today, I do have a Reading Rainbow episode that takes place in a bindery, like a commercial bindery. So we could watch that after things are wrapped up.
Sure.
It's like, it feels like just what I need to kind of keep some anxiety down.
Yeah. No, let's watch it. Let's have like a movie day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Awesome. Yes. Shall we construct a case for those who haven't seen that stuff?
Yes, please.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll do that and then finish up with the episode, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Cool. There's a great song called In the Binder, and that's all I'm going to say about it for now. But it's really good. So,
I think since I've already seen the case making, I'm just gonna head out.
yeah, awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
You already have it recorded too, right? The case making. You have it recorded on the last video.
Of the case construction?
Yeah.
No, I didn't record last class, so I'm having to redo everything. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
All right, I'll probably just stick around, but I might be doing some other stuff just since I'm not really good with learning things through video, but I'll still be listening.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever works for you. So once you have your text block made, you can then base your measurements off of this object to cut down your covers. So the width of your covers are the width of the text block without the extra end sheets. But the width of the text block minus 2 millimeters, which accounts for a joint that we are creating. So I'll just grab some board. Okay, so here's some scrap board that I have, and the measurement will be the width of the text block minus 2 millimeters. And that's because, let me just trim that real quick. And if you don't have a paper cutter, which probably most people don't, you can use an X-Acto knife and just keep going over it and over it. Like, it might take 5 or 6 times. If you don't have an X-Acto knife, then scissors, I guess, or a box cutter, or trying to think what else. I'm sure you could come up with something creative to get that board cut down. But the idea behind the minus 2 millimeters is that we'll create a joint right here of 6 millimeters, which pushes the board out, but then we still want a square. So that's where those measurements come from, having the joint and then still having the board stick beyond the pages of the book. So once you have both of those, we now need a spine piece, which is made of cardstock. So Cardstock is preferred, but you could also, if you want a heftier spine, use binder's board. Or if you don't have cardstock, you could try gluing a couple pieces of paper together, laminating them, so it's a little bit stronger on the spine. And then we want to measure the width of the spine plus half a board thickness, which seems kind of silly, but it really does help to have a little bit extra space in the spine. Spine piece. So I like to press down on the text block with a piece of board and then put the cardstock right up next to it and transfer the width. So,
Would you say the spine looks different if you use cardstock versus the binder's board? Like, is it like really obvious, or is it just one more rigid than the other?
It is kind of obvious. Like, I've seen handmade books with the binder's board spine, and it doesn't look quite as elegant, or I don't know if elegant's the right word, but like, it looks bulky to me, just because I learned with cardstock. I'm trying to think. I don't have any examples, or maybe on my shelf. Okay. Like, this book, commercial book, seems like it's made with binder's board on the spine. And because this one is so big and used like a textbook really, it kind of works for it. But if it was any smaller and meant to be just like, I don't know, a journal or something, I might recommend something thinner. But that's something you can play with for sure. Different types of paper. Yeah. So I'm just gonna transfer that mark here. Which is going, yes, halfway. Half of the board measurement here is where I made the mark. And then can cut a parallel line right there to the width of our spine. And just leave it exact on there. Okay, and the last little paper that we need is just a scrap paper, which is for gluing and holding together the spine piece and the boards. So I'm going to use this scrap piece of paper and cut it to the height of the board, just using it as a measurement. Almost lost my X-Acto, and there's no one to tell me where it is. Ah! Ugh. Struggles of isolated teaching. This piece of paper actually only needs to be about 3 inches wide. And since it's going to be covered, it's really just for function. Doesn't really matter too much. 3 or 4 inches works. Okay. So we have, this is called the lap component, and the spine piece will be glued to it, and then the boards will be glued to the other side. So I'll show that process now. Are there any questions so far? Put some scrap paper down and glue out the spine. Does everyone have some kind of glue that you can use? Yeah, Elmer's works just fine and dandy. Wood glue, if it's too thick, you could water it down. Craft glue, like tacky glue, could be watered down. We're gonna position the spine piece in the very middle of that piece of paper and bone fold it, both sides. Ideally, you would let this dry under a weight for until it's dry, like 5 minutes, but we'll keep going forward. Our next step is to define the edges of the spine piece by using your bone folder to go along the edge of the spine piece. You can also define it by folding against it like that. Like that. The reason that we do that is that we could operate from the spine piece looking up at us, but what we're doing right now is creating the spine of the case. And if we were to move forward and attach boards on this side, it wouldn't be as smooth as if we had the back of the paper making a really nice smooth transition. So that's why we're making that flip right now. Our next step is making marks that are 6 millimeters from the spine piece. So, take our ruler and mark 6 millimeters away, which if you don't have a metric ruler, that is a 1/4 inch. So 1/4 inch. And then connect those dots to show a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters from the spine piece. And then we'll mark lines going down. This is where we'll be setting our board, which we'll do next. So we have spine and 6 millimeter lines. Okay, our next step is to glue these boards along those 6 millimeter lines. So we'll put glue at that approximate distance down the side of the board. In theory, I guess you could glue out the paper, but I think the reasoning of gluing the board is that we have a really precise line, I guess, and it would be hard to glue precisely down that paper line. Pretty sure that's the reasoning. So press down from both sides. Use your bone folder to get it really nice and fused, board to paper. And repeat that process for the board on the other side. Going out. And paste it down. And bone fold. Ideally, we would let this dry under weight. So we'll just imagine that that's happening. And then you'll take it out of the weight and you can check your fit by placing your text block inside the case. And I like to always just check it over to be sure it fits real nice. And what I'm looking for is not too much extra space between the boards and the text block, and not too little space so that it's like bulging out of it. So that fit looks pretty good. Yeah, everything looks pretty dandy about that case. Any questions thus far? Nice, good, Mac.
What?
Hey,
I just
Makes sense so far about making that case?
yeah, I just ordered some book binding stuff on Amazon. It cost me like 70.
What happened?
I just ordered like chipboard and other stuff
Yeah.
and cardstock, and it all adds up so much.
Sure. I've been trying to rack my brain on like sneaking into the studio and cutting stuff down and like sending it to you all. We are on a spending freeze, so I don't think I could get CAD money. But if any of y'all wanted that, we could work out a shipping thing where I could reimburse me to ship it or something.
Yeah.
But just shoot me an email if that's something you want to talk about. Could also laminate cereal box board to create a nice board. That's one option. Or other found board.
What about for fabric?
Fabric, yeah. I attached a link on my courses from last class on how to back any cloth with paper by using weight paste. It's really good. My professor, Sarah Bryant, posted this in her blog, and it's funny, and I mean, it's just really good. Let me just put that in the chat as well. So she goes over also how to make wheat paste, which you can use wheat starch or flour or anything with starch in it to boil it. Just boil it on the stove for about half an hour with water, and it'll thicken up, and you can use that for an adhesive and to back cloth with. So our next step that we can do is to cover this case with cloth or paper or whatever cover material you'd like to use. Last time I covered just the spine with cloth and the edges with paper, found paper. Maybe this time I'll do full cloth so the folks who saw it last time can see something different. Just know that you can start with the spine with one material and finish out the other side with different material. I have some of the marbled paper that we made.
Ooh.
The green one even. Maybe I'll do that for this book. And so you'll use your case for your measurements. And we want to have an extra 1/2 inch for turn-ins. So I like to put the case on one side and then use the width of the ruler a little bit more than 1 inch as a gauge. And cut along there. And then we want 1/2 inch head and tail. So you can turn it and do that same thing. And use some scrap paper, this Country Max. Y'all, I think I'm getting chicks. Can I just say that? I think my brother and I are gonna raise some chickens.
Yes.
Like, this isolation thing is getting to be crazy. I need chicks. I can't.
No, that's so funny. Actually, my mom and I were talking the other day about maybe getting chickens.
Oh my
Also,
god.
I swear.
Yeah.
In resiliency, I mean, raising.
They like live for a long time too. It's not like you have them for like 2 years like a hamster. Like chickens, they live forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get wanting to get the chickens. Please update us on that.
Yeah, I'm building the coop using my kind of structural binding skills to. And it's I can show you some photos of that next time too.
Yes.
Okay, so for covering our case here, we want to glue out the paper or whatever material that you're using, and then we'll be putting the case on it centered. So it's nice to use some kind of slippery glue. This that I have is straight up PVA, but I have some Elmer's glue as well. Okay. So glue out the entire paper on the back. And carefully position the case in the middle of that paper material. And we're going to push down on the boards like this perpendicularly so we can get really good contact in that joint area. Before laying them down, actually flip the paper over and use your finger and a bone folder to go along that board edge. This is like the nice key look in this case binding, so take your time and be careful. Then lay the paper down fully and do the same thing on the other side. Going along the board edge here. And smooth it out. And smooth out both sides. Get good contact. If you don't have decorative paper at home, you can tear out old pages of books. Just ask whoever owns the book. You can do that. Magazines, drawings. Make some drawings for your cover. Watercolor, or, you know. I think outside the box here on what we can cover our books with. Next step will be turning in some clean paper. And we'll do the miters like usual on all of our corners, a 1.5 thickness away. Here, 1.5 thickness. And then we'll turn in the head and tail first, which can be slightly challenging with a full out piece of material. It's a little bit more manageable with just the cloth and then paper, but it's very doable. We'll rock the board edge on the paper, and then starting in the middle and working our way out, we'll do our best to make just a little bit of creasing because there's extra material from that joint area. Just do your best to smooth it out and then smooth out the rest of it. Focus on the board edges to get really nice contact, clean edges. And then repeat for the other side. Rock it up and carefully smooth it down. And the edges, 4 edges. Glue it out. And then this is just a repeat, but tuck in that little bit of extra material on both sides. So we get nice, clean corners. Fold. Not quite enough glue. And for the last one, same thing. Look in the edge. That. is the case constructed, we can you can kind of define the spine by creasing along it. And then just check again our fit, see how it looks. Ooh, hot dang. So yeah, you can kind of see how that joint looks in action. So this is the point at which I would like everyone to get to by Tuesday so we can move along with the structure.
Okay.
Any questions on that covering technique? Ideally, we would let it dry under weight at this point. Yeah, awesome. If there aren't any other questions, Nikki or Joe, questions or concerns? Cool. Do we want to take a little breather? You can grab a snack or drink or whatever you need to get comfy and put on Reading Rainbow.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna wash out my brush and I'll be right back.